I mean, I love my parents individually. They are wonderful people. But growing up when, you know, it was very integral for me to see that, I did not see that. No, it's just like now it's like I'm literally having to learn this, you know, by learning exactly what it is that I should not tolerate. And even when I know I shouldn't tolerate, it has been difficult in the past to just kind of like, you know, cut it off, cut dry. Being able to, you know, try to figure that out and like navigate that now, it's definitely, it's a little difficult.
No, because for most things, I believe, you got to see it to believe it. Mm-hmm. It's easy to understand it when you see like, oh, this is two people, they look happy. Not just they look happy, they demonstrate what a healthy relationship dynamic is. Because as you said, we only know what we see. So there could be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you're not privy to. And, you know, people could really not like each other.
That's something deep to think about, really. Yeah, because I mean, I don't know, because once you kind of brought that into perspective, if that was like your, you know, that was the only person that you were supposed to depend on, you were supposed to feel some type of, you know, comfort in knowing that if anybody, if you had no one else, like you were supposed, you know, as a parent, you were supposed to, well, as a child, you were supposed to depend on your parent. That's correct. You know, of course, like probably what you see in, you know, with like your friends and their parents and things like that. It kind of, the thought popped up in my mind, because it's like, where are you supposed to go? Like, who are you
Great question.
going to lean on? Like, who are you supposed to like find that comfort in? And I think that's probably how I look at it, as like, I know that I'm deserving of love. I know that eventually like that is something that I want, and you know, speaking into existence, I'm going to have. But you will. Yeah, but it's also like, well, how am I even supposed to like move in that type of situation when it does happen? Like, how am I supposed to act? Because I mean, I love my parents individually. They are wonderful people. But growing up when, you know, it was very integral for me to see that, I did not see that. So it's like now, which I know we're going to talk about it, but like, it's just...
That's okay. If you want to go there, you can go there.
Yeah, you know, it's just like, now it's like, I'm literally having to learn this, you know, by learning exactly what it is that I should not tolerate. And even when I know I shouldn't tolerate, it has been difficult in the past to just kind of like, you know, cut it off, cut dry. You know, I have friends that I grew up with, you know, obviously, you know, all that glitters isn't gold. So I don't know, you know, if anything or like what happened behind the scenes. Yeah. But both of my two best friends from like elementary to high school, their parents were together. Their parents were still together. My God family, like they are all still together. And so it's like seeing all of that and then seeing them come in to, you know, shelter like me and my sister from the stuff that, you know, my parents were going through, or even to just like, you know, help them and console them when they were going through the stuff. It's like, dang, like you know, they're a united front. Yeah. They're a big happy family and stuff like that. And so it's like, I don't even know necessarily how to register like what that is supposed to look like, because for the majority of my life I had, you know, dysfunction. And when I say dysfunction, like I did not grow up in a bad, you know, household or anything like that, but my parents did fight a lot. So so
maybe more dysfunction on the communication side.
Yes,
not
in
like
the communication.
like
no.
abuse or anything like that.
Yeah. No, it was literally just all like verbal. So being able to, you know, try to figure that out and like navigate that now, it's definitely, it's a little difficult.
No, for sure. Hey, listen, the only reason why I can talk about this stuff to the degree that I can is because I spent a lot of years in therapy trying to deconstruct a lot of this. And even in grad school, I remember it was difficult because I had to do a lot of role play. We had to talk a lot about it. And so I had to get very fluent in trying to understand what that must be like. So trying to give credit in terms of the things that parents do to try to provide the best that they can. Because I'm very much an optimist. I like to believe that people do try to do the best that they can with whatever they have. It's just their starting point might be really far away from what we would like them to be, right? So I hold that. And at the same time, I also say, but then there's also things that I would truly only hope that as individuals, we recognize something's wrong. What am I willing or prepared to do to address it? Mm-hmm. That's like one of the biggest sort of anchoring points of why we're having these types of discussions, because it's so often we just simply don't.
Yeah.
And you can't change anything if you don't acknowledge that something's wrong. And if you're not willing to do anything about it, then expect more of the same, right?
Yeah.
So my hope in us having these discussions and really talking in more detail about this stuff and really willing to own a lot of this vulnerability that's really necessary, right, to get there, is to inspire other people out there who may be seeing this and hearing this and thinking, oh, my situation is very comparable or similar to what Sierra said she went through or what I went through. And I need some idea of maybe how I can address some of these issues, because all I know is I'm sad all the time. I'm angry all the time. I don't have healthy relationships with people because I never saw a healthy relationship before.
Yeah.
So hoping to, what essentially I feel like you were touching on was like getting healthier models of what that looks like. Because for most things, I believe, you got to see it to believe it. It's easy to understand it when you see like, oh, this is two people, they look happy. Not just they look happy, they demonstrate what a healthy relationship dynamic is. Because as you said, we only know what we see. So there could be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you're not privy to. And people could really not like each other. But if we find those examples, which you were touching on, like your God family and things like that, I resonate with that. Because with me, it was my extended family. Thankfully, I have a really large family on both sides. And my mom's side of the family, there's a lot more women over there. And so because I wasn't getting really any of that, or in all honesty, I was probably deficit emotional compassion whatsoever, they helped balance me a little bit. Not fully, because they actually didn't live in the same city. So that couldn't happen all the time. But when it could, it did give me some sense of like, it is okay to start to share these things. And I always appreciated that, even though I didn't know how to put that into words, but I knew that they at least let me have some of that space to try to understand that. And I know that everybody doesn't get that. And that just means that it makes it much harder to actually start recognizing that stuff may have been wrong the way you had grown up.
Yeah, most definitely. And I say I have not, like, obviously, like what I was saying as far as like my friends and my God family, things like that, I would see that. But I will say a positive turn, something that I would like to think that I model the way that I look for, men romantically, is in the way that I see the way that my stepfather treats my mom. So they met, I want to say, it was definitely my freshman year of college. I want to say like in 2016, they got married in 2018. And just seeing like how he has treated her, but it's like by then, I wasn't necessarily an adult. My brain obviously wasn't fully developed and things like that, but it's like, it takes a lot to unlearn, the things that you've seen. And so I will say like that has definitely been kind of like a shining light in, the darkness that I call, past, examples and things like that.
Sure.
And that's definitely been something that I've thought about as far as like, okay, well, I know what is possible and I know what some people are capable of. Like, I'm sure there are not two of my stepdad, because he is an amazing guy, but it's, just small things that you see, that I would say like that's something that I have really been implementing, something that I didn't really have, before. So I would say like that right there would probably be like my perfect example.
Can you give us an example of some little things that you see that he does that you didn't see with your father and your mother growing up?
Just like random acts of like kindness, random acts
such as
of like love, as far as just, oh well, he thought that Like he knows that she likes, you know, this certain type of candy or whatever. It's small stuff. So just like bringing that home with like flowers or something. My mom, she started getting into plants when COVID happened. This man went to Home Depot, bought a bunch of like boards and stuff like that, and literally built her like an outside planter.
Okay.
It's probably, I don't know how tall. It's a big like just like planter box stand or whatever.
Okay.
Built it with his own 2 hands. Stuff like that. She said one day like she was craving I think it was either steaks or it was barbecue. Either way, the man went and bought a grill the same day, because we literally didn't have a grill.
Okay.
He went and bought a grill and cooked her all of this food. Keep in mind, by that time, it was just us 3 like living in the house or whatever. And I'm like, you didn't have to do this. Like, this is something that I never saw.
Okay.
So, you know, and that's nothing as far as like, you know, that's not a put down on like my dad or anything like that, because he is an amazing man. He does what he can like for myself and my sister. And I'm not just saying this like on his side as far as like the way that they showed love to each other, because they were just not very compatible. So, you know, just seeing like my stepdad do like these crazy, random, like small and also like extravagant things for her, I'm like, yeah, that is what I would want.
Sure. I mean, I think that's why, again, those examples are so necessary, right? Because then you kind of get it, you get a somewhat of an idea of how it could be for you. And I think especially, again, when you're talking about male female dynamics, that's even more important, because so much of it we kind of learn on our own. Which, another thing I would kind of touch on, looping in what you just shared, the difference between how it was with mom and dad together versus mom and now your stepfather, right? What I think, something to kind of just genuinely kind of keep in the back of our minds when we're thinking about relationships, right? Relationship building. So we all have certain examples that we get, whether you like them or not, good, bad, and different. They're examples. So there's things that we're being taught explicitly, meaning mom and dad might be saying like, this is how this should happen, this is how this should be, whatever. And then there's the things that they show you through modeling, the things that they show you through their behavior. So to your point, when mom and dad are kind of like at each other's throats, or they're arguing a lot, or they're, you know, fussing a lot, that's demonstrating that's what relationships look like, right? When you're young, because we don't know any better. We only know what we see. And then what did you just talk about? You talked about, okay, so now I see my mom with the stepdad, and now he's like listening. He's like paying attention to these little things that my mom talks about that she really appreciates, and then he makes the effort to do them, right?
Yeah.
So that's being thoughtful. That's being intentional, which I think are all great signs. That's things that I think we would all want. But again, it's trying to understand, like, where's that starting point? Where's our baseline here, right? Because you said prior to that, I didn't know what to look for. And I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm trying to decouple that, because what I know is what my mom and my dad did for the majority of my life, right? I had the same problem, because all I saw with my father, not in terms of how he treated women, because that necessarily wasn't a problem, but it was more the way his and my relationship was impacted the way that I dealt with women, in terms of and I've said this on the platform before, had issues with equating love and abuse together, particularly physical, and trying to understand that those two are not supposed to go together. But in my case, in my sister's case, that's the way that we learned it, because that's the only time our father would say that he loved us was after we got beat. So it's very hard to understand that what you experienced, although it was your lived experience, doesn't mean that it was okay. It doesn't mean that we want that to be normalized. But that's really hard if you've never been challenged.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? Even if you disagree and you're like, I don't like that it happened, but there's a very high probability the first relationship, maybe the first two, who knows? It might be all of them until you like, you know, hit a breaking point. You might keep just entertaining people that are like reminiscent of what you had growing up, and we had no business dealing with these people, and yet we do.
Yeah, that is a revelation I literally just discovered a couple weeks ago. Literally, because I was talking to my therapist about a past situation, and just like just how it did not work out just because of, communication. And it wasn't necessarily soul communication. We had completely different values at the core anyway. And, we're going
to definitely get into that one in a little bit.
But it's just the communication. And so she kind of, made the revelation of like, okay, well, Sierra, like, how did, your communication like with your father and your mom look like? And even like with my dad and I, we talk about things like he gives me a lot of advice as far as like, work and like surface level things. But when it comes to like tough situations, a lot of times, especially him and my sister, we go at it. I don't really go at it as much with him anymore just because I don't really feel like it, and then also like he doesn't really give me too much. But okay. I know like in college a lot of the times like it would either be just full-blown fights or we literally just would not talk at all. And so she was talking about how I told her like I longed for like just a more like a deeper emotional connection with my dad. And she was like, okay, well, what were you missing? And I told her about like two specific past examples. Yes. And she was like, okay, so what were you missing in those past situations? I was like, oh my God, emotional communication, because we did not have that. And so I definitely made the realization that like what I lacked with my father is what I had in these past relationships. And even there have been situations where there would be men that are very like emotional intelligent telling me, how they feel about certain things that I would do. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you, I would be confused. I would be like, what are you, like I'm not doing this. Why are you addressing this?
Why are you sharing these things?
Yes, exactly. And I was like, oh my God, this is obviously something that I'm trying to work on now, but it's like the thing that I want is what I have literally been driving away for so many years. And I literally just discovered that maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So
that's powerful.
Yeah.
I'm going to reiterate that point again, because I think that we need to all make sure that we fully appreciate what you just said. So you said over the last 2 weeks in therapy, you have recognized that the things that you wanted from a partner you've pushed away, and the things that maybe are more dysfunctional but that you're more accustomed to, you have invited in. Right? That's the power of environment.
Yeah.
That's the power of perception, because even the stuff, again, to your point, the stuff that you don't want, you allowed. Right? This is part of our own internal reflection, right? You allowed these people in that probably didn't deserve the opportunity. And the ones that wanted to give it to you, you didn't want it. And not in terms of you didn't truly desire it, but maybe it was so foreign.
I didn't know.
You didn't know how to handle that. And so you let it go.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a fair characterization?
That is right on the dot. That is exactly what happened.
And I think, again, to your point, and again, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's why it's so important for us to talk about these things, to kind of circle back to the parenting thing for a second. Imagine this for a moment. Go with me on this dream vision. So you and your mom have a fantastic relationship, your entire upbringing. Okay? First serious boyfriend, 19. And as part of the courting process, he needs to get to know mom and dad. Starts to get to know you, get to know mom. You have a good feeling. Mom sits you down. Sierra, sweetheart, I want to talk to you. There's some things about him that I don't agree with. Do you think if you had the level of connection and relationship with your mom at that time, in my fictional scenario, you would have probably avoided some of the men that you've dealt with?
Probably. Because, I mean, stuff like that has happened. As far as, not necessarily, because out of, like, during my adulthood, she's only met one person, and surprisingly she liked him, but I also just left out a lot of the BS that I had gone through with him.
Wait, quick follow-up question. You said she only met one, so how many in total were you dealing with, or had maybe a serious relationship with?
Serious? I guess I would probably say he was probably the only one as far as like actual serious.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about
only
okay?
one.
So for the sake of this example, add in the ones that weren't as serious. How many are we
Okay.
talking in total? Not to out yourself, but I'm gonna take this somewhere. I promise.
Oh no, she had meant two. There was two. Okay, I want to say maybe total.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say 3 or 4.
Okay.
But I don't want to cut you. I do, because there was another one that she had met, and it was a situation like that. But I ignored her.
Okay.
Obviously, it ended. It didn't
Okay.
end well, but yeah.
So
yeah.
four. So 4. 2 she met, 2 she didn't. So 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
Why did she not meet the other 2?
Honestly,
As much as you're willing to address that.
I think like the opportunities just weren't there, and then also I just don't want to introduce my mom to somebody unless I know like this is somebody that I really really like care about and want. Like the first time with the dude that I was like I would say I loved him.
First love? It's okay to own it, even if it didn't go well.
I don't want him to see this. I don't want to.
Hey, listen, I'll own mine too. Listen,
Like-
the first ones aren't always the best. Doesn't mean they're terrible people. Sometimes there's just a lot of
Yeah.
learning that has to happen.
Yeah, but I would probably say, yeah, he was probably my first love.
Okay.
And even with that, like that was something because he had come into town, and even at that point, like I did not want him to meet her just because I don't know. I value my mom's opinion a lot, so I'll tell her about like even guys that I'm dating now. I'll just be like, oh yeah, this is this, that, and the third, just so that she knows. But because she likes to bring people up, so even to this day she still brings him up.
I get that.
She's like, oh,
It's
like
kind of annoying.
have you talked to so-and-so? I'm like, no, mom,
Like let it go. That was like 3 years ago. You stopped bringing them up.
We are done. Like we are like, and we'll still, communicate or whatever. Like we do like check-ins and stuff, but that's just, just to make sure like we're good or whatever.
Yeah.
But I also just don't like the fact that like she remembers these people and she'll bring them up like, how are you doing? But for the most part, I don't even have like an actual reason. I would just say I just don't want them meeting my mom yet. That's a big thing for me.
Unless
So-
they're at a certain level.
Exactly.
No connection.
Like if it's something where I feel like, okay, like this definitely has some sort of like longevity or whatever, then I will make arrangements to introduce them to you. But
Respect.
yeah, other than that, nah.
Okay. and I appreciate you sharing that. I feel like there's a couple of different ways we could take that, because on one hand, you mentioned that some of them mom met, gave her feedback, you ignored it because maybe you weren't like in that reflective state yet where you were like fully appreciating not just her feedback, but that the seriousness that you want to have if you're going to entertain these people, right? And if mom's saying, hey, maybe they're not worth your time, you're like, okay, I need to go move on because she doesn't fully agree. I'm kind of maybe someone on the fence, or there's some things that are missing that I would like to have. But going back to our point about the parental relationship, if we have greater sense of trust and openness with them, then we're willing to hear that feedback. It doesn't mean we have to agree with it, right? But I'm willing to hear that feedback. Why? Because you have wisdom, because you have experience. Doesn't mean that
good.
we are the same. It doesn't mean that your experience is my lived experience 100%. But this would be the point I would make to you. And again, I'll put it back on me. Some of the things that I've dealt with, I will say, I think I've been quite fortunate. The relationships that I've had, I think I've been pretty good about selecting partners. Only the first one I think was a little bit of a challenge, and it wasn't terrible. It's just that there's some stuff I didn't really know about myself at that time, like I said, in the way that my father was. But to me, I would be doing a huge disservice to my son, to my clients, particularly the young males, and anybody on this platform, if I didn't talk about that experience. And the reason why is because a lot of times we don't share these honest discussions about what we've gone through. And that could be the difference between you dealing with somebody and you not dealing with them. Between you thinking that relationship is going to be something real and your parents like, hold on, I'm not saying I know them, but that's very similar to what I've dealt with. And yes, times are different, generations are different, but people are fundamentally more often than not the same. Even in different parts of the world. Like there's only so many different variations of humans. And so if we have these closer relationships with them, perhaps we would seek that information. Mom, I want to tell you about this guy that I'm talking to. Okay. What's he about? Who are his people? What does he want? How does he treat you? Right? Why hasn't he met me yet? All these things. And then if I'm answering all that stuff like no, 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 why?
Yeah.
Why are you dealing with them then? If you're answering no to all the important stuff, right? Then why are you dealing with them? And then you have to kind of sit back, or we have to then sit back and be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know why I'm dealing with them. And then maybe that's an opportunity, not to say like you're wrong, but an opportunity to look in the mirror and say, maybe I should stop wasting my time.